Todo esto es bioeconomía.
Bioeconomy.
En la Amazonía. Y promoverla nos lleva a un futuro con más
qualidade de vida,
Well-being.
calidad de vida,
oportunidades
económicas
Economic opportunities.
y protección de la biodiversidad.
Biodiversity.
conexão,
Innovation.
Convergencia para la bioeconomía en la Panamazonía. Panamazonía en red. Foro de innovación e inversiones en la bioeconomía. Sean bienvenidos.
Welcome everyone.
sejam bem-vindos.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everyone to this important panel that is being hosted by the Pan-Amazon Network that focuses on bioeconomy, innovation and investment. And we have an interesting group of panelists here today to talk about policies and incentives and regulatory models that foster the socio-bioeconomy. I'm the moderator for today, Sarah Gammage. I'm the Director of Policy, Finance and Markets from the Nature Conservancy. And I have the tremendous pleasure of introducing our panelists today. We have some very impressive panelists who are going to speak about their research, their engagement, their support of networks in the Amazon region. We will begin with Mayra Esseeboom. She is a researcher at the Center for Agricultural Research in Suriname, CELOS. She has an MSc in Agricultural Economics from Wageningen University, and her research focuses on non-timber forest products, commercialization, and preservation of traditional knowledge and community development. We will then be followed by Camilo Garzón, who is an economist, an MSc in Economics and Public Policy from the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and he is a researcher at the Stockholm Institute in Latin America. He's been working on bioeconomy, circular economy, and sustainability projects, recently focusing on sustainability analysis of agricultural value chains. We are also joined by Fortunato Angola, an engineer who is the executive director of the Institute for Man, Agriculture and Ecology in Beni, Bolivia. His mission is to contribute to the socio-economic development of the Bolivian Amazon by promoting sustainable production and conserving the areas and life systems of rural communities. And we also are joined by Eduardo Spanó, who is the co-executive director of the Instituto Jataí in Brazil and has over 10 years of experience in digital transformation projects, public sector innovation, and open government. We're delighted to be able to discuss the critical nature of policies and support incentives for the socio-bioeconomy today. Thank you for joining us. May I remind you that you have access to translation and you can listen in the language of your choice. We will be speaking in English, Spanish, and Portuguese today. And I'm going to begin by asking our panelists to share some of their research and analysis. So my first question is for Mayra. You've worked extensively on acai in Brazil, and we know that acai has reached a global audience. You have particularly interesting experience with acai cultivation in Suriname. Can you share more about the public policies to support acai production in Suriname? Thank you so much.
Sarah?
Yes, we hear you now. I'm so sorry. We seem to experience a problem. Please do begin.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this great event, which is very important, I think, for the Pan-Amazonian and as a whole, and especially for Suriname to be part of this event is very great. Thank you so much. Let me start by the research we've done in Suriname on acai. I'm working for the Center of Agricultural Research in Suriname, and the most important objective we have is to maintain our forests. So let me put it that, and of course the non-timber forest products. The case of acai in Suriname is that Suriname recognized acai just recently. We have been introduced by acai because acai was and is still an ethnic food, primarily made by the indigenous people, but also the maroon people. They call it carambolas, I think, in Brazil, and especially the maroon people who started the commercialization because of urbanization. People leave, and then when they leave, they go to the capital. They want their ethnic food. So that's how they started. It was mostly female-led micro entrepreneurs based on family, mothers with their daughters, and the only way men or male activity were in place in the processing was harvesting, and the harvesting was done by the maroon males, because they have the traditional ecological knowledge, so they know everything about the forest, and they know how to get in, safely get out, and have fresh and good berries. Of course, after a while, we came across the carimbolas, the people from Brazil, the gold miners, and also because of the hype of natural foods, also Suriname got interested. More people, more ethnic groups of Suriname got interested in the food acai, and that has led that the harvesting was a kind of a free of all, because the Maroon people and also the indigenous people, the to be selling and be having a livelihood in that area, in that sector. What we experience now is that because there is no regulation, we've experienced that it's a kind of free of all. Everybody goes into the forest with the of course the danger of degradation, forest degradation. Also, another aspect there is that we have large investors who are starting to see, of course, how interesting that product is, especially to be exported. So they clear off large spaces of land, forests sometimes, and start planting the acai, and sometimes even acai, which is not a variety, which is from Brazil. In our research, we found out that it would be very much needed to think about land tenure, that those people, those traditional family-led micro entrepreneurs, that they have to have their spaces kept. And also part of the research has shown that the consumers, ethnic consumers, really prefer fresh acai. And new consumers don't have that taste. I know people from Brazil and people who are used to eating acai, they will taste the difference immediately. Like, oh no, this is not this is not fresh. So they don't want that. So one of the policy measures that we recommend is that the government makes policy around exporting. So if we have great investors, then give them a policy made for tax reduction, for enhancing, improving, and how do you say that? Stimulating them to get on the export market, so that our internal market will not be overflown by acai from big companies, and that one of the other policy recommendations is that we try to maintain these family-led micro-entrepreneurs because they are making a living on an honest way from the forest where they're living. So we cannot get that away from them. We cannot get somebody else taking their place. So we need to segment the consumers and say this is going to be for the export, this part is going to be for the internal market, and the internal market will be safe for only the micro entrepreneurs, the family-led and micro entrepreneurs, and the maroon people who can have an honest breadwinning with that. Of course, we also have recommendations with regards to the land tenure. How we're going to take care of not the degrading the forests that are in Suriname, because if we have everybody going in and just cutting down trees, then we have a problem. So we also have policy measurements with regards to that. And we also recommend a policy be made for an internal certification for the micro entrepreneurs to be keeping their market share within the country. So these are the three main things I want to take on, and I'm glad to give the floor to somebody else. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayra. That's extremely helpful to have your analysis. I am now going to ask Camilo. Camilo, you've worked on policy advocacy for some time with SEI. Can you tell me a little bit about the public policies that need to be in place both locally and regionally? And can you also tell us about the tools and learnings that you have to really incorporate the socio-bioeconomy in public policy? You have 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me some time to speak. And it will be I'm going to show you with my presentation how we approach these policies. So I'm sharing over here. Can you just confirm if you can see it? All right, thank you very much. So from this institute in Latin America, we checked how we can connect this local knowledge and promote bioeconomy in public policies in different ways. And we implemented a few dialogues with regard to the policies, some alliances with political institutions and governmental institutions in Colombia and in different levels, in the local level, in the regional and the national levels as well. So what we're trying to promote to be able to position bioeconomy in the public policies, we want to have a joint mission about how to incorporate bioeconomy in the public policies and what kind of impact we want to have in socioeconomy. And for this, what allowed us to have these political dialogues was to sit down, get together with different players, not only players from the government, but also people from communities, the social society, civil society, different companies, depending on the sectors, so that we could build this vision together. And this was organized in different levels, different sectors. And I would like to show you some of the lessons learned through this exercise and the work that we did around this chain, this value chain that was about manioc. So manioc is a plant that allowed us to have good resources in Colombia and in other countries as well. And because of the market dynamics and the investment made by the state, we had a peak in the last few years in Colombia. And when we analyze the value chain of manioc in Colombia, we have to look at the different players that allowed us to get to this development in terms of policies and these routes to bioeconomy. And this is what I want to show you. I want to show you these tools that we use to be able to put these into practice and to be able to have all of this success. So this is something that we call the scenario we call scenarios for the future. And basically, it allows the different players that have different interests and focus on different things. It shows how we can align all of them so we can have a joint vision of where we want to get to and incorporating bioeconomy of the public policies. So how does this exercise work? So this exercise looks from the future backwards. So we start 10 years ahead, 2034, 2035. What do we want to see? What do we expect to see? What do we dream of seeing in 2035 for all the players? And after we agree to that, after discussing it, we have a broader view of things. And then from the future, we move to the present. So then in 2029, in 5 years' time, what do we want to have? What do we need to have to reach this objective from 2034? And so on until we get to the present. This allows us to place these stones so that we can step on them and get to a broader view. And this view allows us to recognize that different companies work together with factors inside the community, in the academic world, and getting to what we dream of in 2034. And there's something else that is based on this exercise too. What we did was sustainability agreements in the value chains. The sustainability allows us to get to value chains and efficient public policies for Manio. And there's some branching that allows us to get to sustainability agreements here. We have a common mission, which is to place this mission in practice, put it into practice so that all the players can put their little grains of sand, develop this chain, and generate benefits for everyone in society. The first thing is the definition coming from the players. And after this definition, we're going to be able to come to agreements. And after that, we have indicators. And these indicators are extremely important to get to do the monitoring, and this monitoring gets into a biofeedback loop. And what we see over here is what is recognized at the end. So the need to get clear governance in this value chain, and this allows us to provide benefits that are social and economic in the whole value chain. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Fortunato. So Fortunato, please, could you please share your experience? The experience of the incidents in the local public policies to promote the increased value of commercialization of the forest products. We can't hear you. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thank you for the invitation and to share my experience here of the Bolivian Amazon. So just so you understand, I'm going to tell a little story so that you can understand the process that we have over here, just very quickly. So first of all, we work in the Amazon with peasants that we consider to be indigenous as well. So they used the forest, right? They always lived in the forest, and the economy was based on the forest. So all of this information, the history involved, these families have always lived in the forest. So What happened in Bolivia was that they did not want to recognize their rights, the collective rights for the families and the indigenous population. So if you look at the stories, the story of the Bolivian Amazon and the territory where in 1996 there was a change and they did not recognize the struggles that they went through. And with the territories and the land, we included in this march that recognizes the natural resources. So the peasant families, indigenous families could only use, they could hunt and fish, but natural resources like wood belonged to the entrepreneurs. So this change, this was after a lot of manifestations and a lot of fighting, but we had to fight because we thought it was a just cause and we could not isolate ourselves from this right. And therefore, in 2000, there was a significant advance, and we were able to change the law and since then, 500 hectares per family at least, that's what was given. So from this on, there was a whole process, and with this struggle, they were able to give 4 million hectares to families, to indigenous families. And that's the strong work we have to do. What are we going to do with the 4,000 hectares? So 4 million hectares, actually, not 4,000, 4 million. So in the beginning, we started doing integrated management of the forest. What does that mean? So I don't want the family to only see that there's wood and Brazil nuts in the forest. No, what we should do is an integrated management of it. We should plan all the resources in the forest, and from then on, we start changing the community governance. So in other words, how the communities are going to administrate their territory as from their laws and territories. So this is work that we did, and in parallel, we had to plan what should be sold all the 12 months of the year. So the agricultural part, this in the Amazon, we're talking about 18% of the profit. So we're talking about a lot of animals, livestock, right? That represent 23%. And the strong point was the forest, which is 34% of the revenue. So first of all, they started doing the policies. So first of all, about the peasants, and we should look at the state with its own resources. They could help to access communication to the cities, and the elderly people were in the cities, and the young people had better conditions if they were in the city as well. So the work that was done was able to get the approval of a law with regard to this and changing the view of the state. And this law talks about what should be done in a more sustainable manner in the Amazon forest, and what the state would provide with regard to the resources to make these improvements. So in other words, provide better education in the field. There's the internet as well. And after the system that was conquered, the state included in its policies that they are going to consume the products like acai and cocoa from the indigenous population, and 80% of these products were subsidized, and the Bolivian state began to make this support, provide this support. So there was a change in the policies, and the economy of the forest has become more sustainable. These families depend on the forest, and the state is also providing a lot of subsidies so that this will continue. The more aggressive policy of the forest is worthless. We have to change, and we have to take in what they think. But now we are providing value from the social, political, and environmental aspects. That's what I wanted to say to you. Thank you very much. It's really very important to add this value of the forest with these policies, and this is for the advance. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Eduardo from the Jataí Institute to add to his analysis.
Access to markets through public procurement laws is an experience that's highlighted in many fora. Can you share more about the support that the Instituto Jataí has provided to really promote sustainable public procurement? Thank you so much.
Obrigado, Sara. Obrigado pela pergunta.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this debate. So this forum is a little more international, so I'm going to start sharing the context of the strategic use of the purchasing of the food and what we've done at the Institute to try and support these policies. So the first point that is very relevant, and this can be shared, is the importance of the purchasing, public purchasing, because of the market. So here in Brazil, over the last few years, there are different levels, right? Municipal, state, and national. So there's a whole chain involved. So it's a purchase that is very relevant, and it affects the market. When we talk about food, Brazil is a big purchaser of food. When we talk about food for schools, hospitals, universities, the armed forces, the social part of it, Brazil is a big buyer and can support these production chains. And in Brazil, as a rule, it's the best price, but in food we also have robust policies for strategic use of the purchasing so that we can shape the markets. And we have the national food program for schools, PNAE, and the one for food in general. So these are strategic, large projects, and they have the focus of including family agriculture and provide food safety. So it is in several international forums as well. And the first point is that in this construction, we were able to create this family agriculture legal aspect, and there's an inclusive format in terms of the family agriculture. So there's a certain limit to how much they can produce, and they get their money from this. And then there are the other populations, Quilombola, the indigenous populations, and there's a focus of 30% in the purchasing of food. 30% is destined to this segment, to buy food. So in this program for food at school, we got to 1.6 billion reais in purchasing in this segment for the country, and 42%, and 5.5 billion reais. So the possibility of shaping the market, right? And this is in Brazil, and what we have done at the Institute now. So we have developed studies to try and make partnerships with the Ministry of Public Services here at the government, the federal government level. And we were able to deepen these numbers a little, go in deeper to understand what it means for the region, Amazônia Legal, and also trying to get to specific numbers. So beyond family agriculture, which is more social, but also the purchasing, try to identify what is being bought by who, what products, and if it's the indigenous population or the quilombolas population. That's what we try to understand better, and also barriers to reach the market. We already know about more exploratory conversations that there are still barriers access for the producers to access the markets. And according to these programs that exist, we have advanced quite a bit, and these programs are model programs. They're very good, but we still have several barriers for these small producers to access the markets. So we're talking about the purchasing. We have improved that, but it's still very complex. So the cooperatives have a person that is able to participate in these programs, and these are the only cooperatives that can access these government projects. And from the city halls and they also have difficulty to buy from family agriculture. And it's really not easy to do. We have moved forward in this, but there's still a great potential challenge to make it easier using the public organs for this. And there's also difficulty to identify the products. So we don't really have the habit of using these ecological labels to differentiate several practices that are used in the agriculture. So we also have difficulty to characterize the products so that we can use more instruments. So, different preferences and other instruments that we have inside the public purchasing for this kind of market. And just to conclude, we have several opportunities to improve upon, and we've been working with the ministries for this. The Ministry of Management wants to hire more from Brazil. This is in marketing and public policies. So we want to use the public purchasing. We also have some roots in Latin America, Chile, and in the UK. So we want to use more of that to provide greater access for public purchasers, and also using it more intentionally. So I think whenever we talk about the role of the state, we also need to regulate things, but we have the incentives, and public purchasing is very important for us to generate revenues for this more sustainable model, economically speaking, and respecting the limits, of course. That's it. Sarah, thank you. Thank you very much, and I'm open to further discussion.
And such important policies to set price floors and to ensure that human and environmental well-being are maintained. The critical role of the state is really highlighted in that. Mayra, I'm going to ask you some questions because you brought up the important nature of helping stewards diversify their income base and get access to export opportunities. Can you talk a little more about that, but also talk about how you can set these types of incentives and supports in place without promoting monoculture and really producing outcomes that are sustainable and that are compatible with the forest ecosystem? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this question. And yes, of course, the first thing, because we cannot have policy which is not data driven. So the first thing that we have to do as a country, in our country, because we lean a lot on our big brother Brazil, of course, our neighbor, big neighbor. So as a small country, we're going to lean a little bit more to their information, their data, their results. And for us, it's very important to have our own data. So the first thing, all these big companies want to have the Brazilian variety, which is good, which is impressive. But with climate change rising, we need to be that, because we first need to know what we have and how this is working for us, instead of just planting plantations full of the Brazilian variety. Another thing is we can learn from the Brazilian experience if we look at the Raveiros who have, like they call it, the association. All the forests are only acai is there, and which is giving the traditional people, the forest-based people, problems getting other fruits, other food from the forest because it's only acai which is there. So we need to learn from that. We need to take the lessons learned from Brazil and try to improve on that. So agroforestry systems, which we can look at, because people who know acai likes cold, wet feet. That's how we call it in Dutch, of course, wet feet. So we need to look which agroforestry system is suitable for the acai here and make the plantation more or less not monoculture. And especially if we're getting varieties from abroad, then it's more likely to be infected by pests and those kind of things. So we need to do that. Also, with regard to export, if you look at all the certification schemes and all the regulations that is made for especially exporting to other countries, we can still try to find a niche market within those countries. Try not to get on the commodify the products, but try to stay in the niche markets, which is very difficult. I can say that, but we need to do that because if we learn again from Brazil, then we should try to as a country to maintain the niche segment and keep a good premium price for our product. That is it.
Thank you so much. And what a precise answer. Very helpful. Camilo, can I ask you to talk about how you ensure adequate benefit sharing in these value chains? So you've talked about the development and the co-development of these value chains and these environmental agreements. How do you ensure that the stewards of the forest who are participating really receive the benefits and the recognition and the compensation that also compensates them for their labor, for the ecosystem services? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Claro que sí, Sara, muchas gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you very much for the question. So that's a very good question. And it is a challenge for all of us. It's a challenge to be able to have this adequate distribution of the benefits. I believe that the first thing to be mentioned is that we have to identify who the important players are in this value chain first. So we have to be able to view the factors that are behind production, the people who take care of the forest, the people who have direct contact with the ecosystems. So first of all, we should view these people. So it doesn't mean that it's always going to happen, but it is a first step that we have to think about, and it's a priority. So as soon as we do that, as soon as we identify players, it is then important to encourage conversation, right? Dialogue, as I was saying before, for us to be able to sit down at the same table and build a joint vision. And of course, recognizing that we can have mutual benefits. So when we're talking about a chain that starts with production and processing and commercialization, so all of the players involved are going to benefit from the work, from each other's work. So we need to have a coordination or a cooperation. And considering the cooperation, it's not that competitive, but it's the first step for us to strengthen and build this value chain. And we see a little bit more in the next step. So we know that this doesn't happen from one day to the next. They are processes that take time, but considering what was done and what was strengthened in this joint vision, then we're able to think about the distribution of the benefits and discuss this and how we can recognize what each person can add to this value chain. So at this point, when we were able to put this into practice with different mechanisms and different tools to be able to recognize everybody's value, not only the economic value, but also to have environmental protection and the care in terms of the ecosystem. So I believe it is a process that takes time. I know that. And I believe that it's part of this message that I wanted to pass on to you about the experience that we have in the field and for us to really have a governance in the value chain. So it's not only a transaction, it's a whole co-construction process between different players. And the result of that is the strengthening of the chain with the benefits, the economic benefits, as well as reducing the environmental impact. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, Fortunato, you talked about the crucial importance of the collective planning in the ordering of the sector and in that of the producers, the collectors. So, could you please describe the role of the response of these complaints to this collective planning and how it was possible to obtain success, the success that you obtained from these chains that you're monitoring? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, as I said before, the fight was worth it. So it was not in vain because there was a lot of time investment. There's also a lot of studying done so that the needs would be addressed. And most of the 500 hectares for a certain family. So if we want to conserve the forest, we need only 50 hectares, but they gave us more. They gave us 500 hectares, and out of the 500 hectares, we're going to talk about the nuts, and then we also have cacao from the forest and cocoa from the forest, and we're going to be able to provide sustainability the 12 months of the year. Now, when the state accepted this proposal, and that was a great step, so it was an important step that the state would be able to address the demands that came up during the planning and over time. So maybe we could plan, for example, in the forest, we have more than 8 strategic products for us that have a big nutritional value, and that should be incorporated in the subsidy. We were then prepared for the organization of these producers, so they would do sustainable harvesting and then the processing, and the state can guarantee us product in the market. So, for example, the EVA company, that is a state company, it's a public state company, and it buys 80% of the production from the associations, so that later this will be processed in acai, and then this is going to be disseminated in the state with a subsidy. So it started buying cupuaçu, and now it's starting to buy other products. So this whole process brought things to our chain. And the academic world also started participating with research because people said they couldn't do any research. And so the university has contributed to the research, saying what can be done, what products we can develop because of the biodiversity that we have in the forest. And as a result, we have grown. And I would like to say that the great step is for the state to accept the demands from the sector and the indigenous population as well, and accepting the fact that they are assuming this production, this purchase. So the state is guaranteeing market for them. So I believe that this was an important step given. And of course, the struggle will continue, but there's something else. The state is recognizing us and it will continue to support us and support us with agricultural equipment so that we can continue to provide this variety of products that the families have here, the indigenous families provide. And I think that this step in the development was exactly this. We hope that the state will continue to assume this responsibility because every time the government changes, sometimes they don't want to recognize what was done before. But the fact that this was already in the law, and we hope that this will continue to happen in the future because this has generated consolidation of this forest. Of course, we also have to recognize that in 2018, when the state started to recognize the indigenous communities, we suffered a lot of pressure. So maybe we had to be in the office and we were, suffering life threats, death threats, and, that really changed
And
things.
my last
Thank you very
question
much.
will be for
Thank you,
Eduardo.
Fortunato.
Eduardo, can you tell us a little bit more about the role of technology and the role of digital services, digitalization, the internet, other types of ways of measuring and monitoring the changes in the socio-bioeconomy that can be supportive of the sustainability objectives? Thank you.
Claro, Sara, obrigado.
Thank you,
A
Sarah.
gente vê assim, o
So
papel da tecnologia como
we
papel
see the
fundamental,
role
né?
of technology as a very important one.
Tem a ver até
And
o porquê da gente estar apoiando as
there's a
iniciativas
reason for us to
do
support the
Brasil,
ministry
como
in
referência.
the Contrata Brasil project, which is the marketplace.
A primeira, só para falar
And
do benefício, a gente
just to talk about the
pensa muito aqui
benefit, first of all,
custos de transação, né? Acho que muitos de nós têm na nossa
there's the
vida
costs of transaction, and then we have the experience of buying things in the marketplace. And
tem uma melhoria, uma facilidade que dá para
it is also easier to bring it in. For the public, of course, we would have the producers and maybe the city hall is buying from them or the federal government. And
marketplace poderia simplificar tudo isso, né?
and then, of course, this could be simplified, right?
Mas a gente também vê vários desafios, né?
But we also see several challenges. We see the public that we would like to try and support in terms of bioeconomy. There's the great challenge of digital inclusion. We know that some cooperatives would have a better structure to participate, but there are others who don't have this. And just to make it clear, I'm not talking on behalf of the ministries, I'm talking on behalf of the population and what we believe in terms of technology. I think the key point is to listen and to build the technology together with the public sector that we want to support, that we support a lot, and we want to employ them better. So we want to take this discussion over, create these collaborative workshops so that we can understand their difficulties and try to create solutions so that we don't implement exclusive technology only, and being able to bring this perspective about who can benefit with technology and bringing all these people into it. So this is the public part coming from the marketplace, but we take care of, we worry about the design and listening to what they need and not just do something top down. And that can end up giving the opposite effect, right? Making them excluded.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. We're now going to watch a brief video from one of our correspondents, Jailson, from the Colectivo da Castaña. This is the Amazon Nuts Observatory. And I invite you all to watch this video and to think very much about the elements that are critical for supporting the socio-bioeconomy and what the advocacy opportunities are to make claims on government and to support collectives in moving the forest bioeconomy forward. Thank you.
Olá, eu sou o Jailson Francisco, sou mobilizador regional do Coletivo da Castanha. E aqui estou representando a região do Alto Rio Solimões, no estado do Amazonas, Brasil. Faço parte do Coletivo da Castanha, que reúne atualmente mais de 200 extrativistas diretamente de mais de 108 organizações de base comunitária. Bem, essas organizações lidam diretamente com extrativistas, produtores, beneficiadores de castanha dos 7 estados da região da Amazônia Legal. E uma das principais causas que nós estamos aprendendo e compreendendo também é como fazer incidência política em prol dessa valorização dos nossos extrativistas e, é claro, do nosso produto, que é a castanha. Dentre essas incidências que eu apresento, algumas valem a pena ser destacadas enquanto grupo, enquanto coletivo, que vai desde a discussão, né, do protagonismo, né, e da participação diretamente dos povos, das tradicionais em decisões políticas, ou na criação de políticas públicas para esse tema. Também fortalecer essa produção da castanha em áreas protegidas. Uma outra incidência é ampliar ou melhorar essa política pública de aquisição de alimentos, que nós chamamos aqui de PA. Isso vai tanto para o parâmetro municipal, como nós tratamos de merenda escolar, quanto parâmetro estadual e federal também. Então, melhorar essa política que já existe contribui bastante para o nosso crescimento enquanto extrativistas. Reduzir impostos, né, tirar impostos ou isentar impostos que tratem diretamente sobre a produção e o beneficiamento de castanha ou a sua comercialização. Além de também investir em pesquisa, tecnologia que envolvam a coleta, a produção e a comercialização de castanha. E nós já estamos colhendo fruto dessa incidência e participação em âmbito municipal, estadual. Um exemplo disso é a própria reforma tributária, que já, em algum momento, já consegue indicar que existe, né, essa preocupação enquanto nós extrativistas. Também o seguro climático, que é algo que já foi protocolado, né, uma lei que já foi protocolada com o seguro climático para extrativistas. Nós estamos muito felizes porque nós estamos percebendo que isso está dando retorno, está dando resultado. E eu queria salientar e valorizar essa união, a importância que essa união enquanto coletivo, enquanto grupo, essa união, esse pensar em comum dos extrativistas e querer o bem ajuda bastante e nós estamos compreendendo. Muito obrigado.
What an impressive account of how collective action can really move forest economies forward and benefit extractivists and the role of the state. Mayra, you have looked extensively into the acai value chain. Are there any lessons learned from public policy there that you think could be applied to other value chains to promote the socio-bioeconomy in Suriname?
Yes, Sarah, again, thank you for the question. Yes, so like, for example, the National Forestry Institute in Suriname is only busy with timber because Suriname is 92% forest. And a lot of our efforts go to timber. And with the National Forest Institute, acai is the first case study model pilot that we want to start in how to better arrange this value chain and which kind of policy has to be in place for other products, which are very important for, of course, our traditional IPPs, our indigenous and tribal peoples, because it's a main thing of livelihood for them. So you don't have to get them out of the forest, and you can keep them in the forest, and they will receive livelihood. So for the acai, it's a really case study not only on the forestry sector in the plantation part and agrobiodiversity, but also in how to commercialize and get market access for big investors for export, and how to maintain the niche product within the country. So there are a lot of examples or a lot of lessons learned which we can take along For example, the medicinal plants industry, which is also starting. We have those kind of projects going on with regards to medicinal plants and traditional medicinal healing to try to combine that with Western systems, so we can have in the hinterlands integrated program, not only with Western medicinal uses, but also with traditional uses. So these kind of things, if you want to think about commercializing and getting policy ahead, is also very important how we are dealing with the IPHAE sector. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Mayra. Camilo, you talked a great deal about integrating local knowledge in the development of policies. Can you talk a bit more about the challenges of doing that and the receptivity of the state to really taking on board the collectives that are living in and stewarding the forests as they develop these socio-bioeconomy value chains? Thank you.
Claro, Sara, dale, muchas gracias por la pregunta. Es importante.
So you have an important question. So it is a challenge. It's important to recognize that we should know about the knowledge and the wisdom that these communities already have. So I believe that this is the first step that we have to take into account. So have the actors involved in these agreements. And actually, it's a dialogue, it's a debate, it's a place where we can talk and we can debate, we can talk to the state, to the academia, to the universities, all these groups, and it's an accessible sort of language for everyone. So that's why we need to think about the value that we have in this local knowledge and the knowledge that other people have as well. That's basically my message. So here, sometimes the decisions with these groups and with the university and with the governmental institutes, maybe we underestimate the value of the locals. So that is wrong. The first thing you have to do is to recognize the importance that this ancestral wisdom has. And frequently, what happens is when we talk about a researcher, basically the scientific methodology or knowledge is the only thing that is valid. But in fact, there's a whole different sort of knowledge that is also very valid. And as we were saying, when we're talking about peers, when we are on the same level, we have a better dialogue and we have an exchange of ideas and a dialogue of knowledge. So we call it a knowledge dialogue. So your knowledge is valid, my knowledge is valid. Let's see what we can do, what we can exchange, and what kind of exchange we can make. That's the first step. And so thank you very much. So Fortunato, you told us about the central topic of bioeconomy and the rights that they have in terms of the land, respecting the forest cycles, and how you see the possibility that a Bolivian company can continue to support these initiatives, and what is the role of the state to guarantee that there will be the recognition of the role of the guardians of the forest in this context. First of all, you're supposed to have unity in the complexity. Here in the Amazon, we have 19 different ethnic groups, and so there should be unity between them to know that the policies that we want are these, because normally we're talking about dividing ourselves. But there's another point that we talk about, which is what is the strengthening of this group and the work that is being done by the group. So this is not very simple, and we should strengthen it in different ways. So ever since the sustainable work that is being done and taking care of the forest, in the generation of the economy, and this has to be done step by step. This chain getting to the market. The important step was for the state to recognize its rights and their rights and giving land for them to work in. But the work from now on should be maintenance. So not allowing them to lose the laws that the state offered. But for this not to be lost, the way that we're paving and what we talked about in these dialogue sessions was the following. There should be a strategic team that will be able to look at the incidents on the state all the time. So, for example, getting together, it's all the associations that create a federation. Federation has one representative, which is the representative that is going to have a direct connection to the state policy or what the state is doing and should always participate in these dialogues and these discussions and the policies to be able to maintain what is being done. Not always good. Sometimes, we hear good things and bad things, but in this process with the municipal governments or the state governments, they are calling the different sectors. The federations are being called. They're listening to the proposals, they're listening to what is being offered, and they're sitting at the negotiation tables. And I think this is something that we should not lose, so that these policies will continue for a long time. And if they are excluded from the politics or the negotiations, maybe this will not develop. Until now, I think that for a few years, as they already created this, and this is not going to be lost easily. Thank you very much, Fortunato. Great points.
About the role of technology in the monitoring and verification and in the evaluation and learning process. How can we ensure that these value chains really are sustaining human well-being and meeting the environmental objectives that we have? What do you recommend that we think about? Where does this capacity need to be installed? What are the indicators we should be looking at? Thank you so much.
Obrigado, Sara.
Thank you, Sarah. So it's a little bit of what I heard. So technology has a good role in making information easier and dealing with the complexity of this, of creation and development of the chains and these bioeconomic market. But once again, it helps us to solve large problems, and we have several. So talking about public purchasing and trying to make this easier, I think this is the way to do it. And in this field of monitoring, in terms of the data that is very granular, things that could make it faster for us to monitor, but we also have challenges in the region. So the regularization of the separation of the lands, access to credit, technical assistance, and other licensing that the agro industry needs to have. So they also need this to be able to sell, right? To be able to export. So I think there are several challenges here, and technology could help a lot. So making it more democratic and making things work better and being better designed for the public. And this is what we want to check. But just to add to the complexity, because sometimes technology is seen as the silver bullet, right? Without thinking that we have great challenges, it only helps us to deal better in a better way with these challenges. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but in terms of purchasing, I think we have more data to be able to have a view of how we're doing this and avoid and give opinions. So this has already been evaluated by a public institution, and there's the perspective of family agriculture. We have the proof that this policy helped to diminish the poverty in the rural areas. So we have this.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, panel, for some very powerful and thoughtful remarks and the opportunity to really discuss how we support the socio-bioeconomy in the Pan-Amazon region robustly with public policy and with a full understanding of the rights of the guardians of the forests where this socio-bioeconomy is intended to thrive. I also want to thank our hosts for the opportunity to have had this discussion and remind everyone that later today there will be a panel on public policy, so please do connect. And finally, I would also like to thank some of our supporters and some of the folk in the audience, particularly Otka. We are immensely grateful for the role that Otka has played and can play in creating space to really discuss what an intra-regional, robust intra-regional economy would look like in support of the socio-bioeconomy. So thank you very much for being with us, Marco Rufino, and thank you very much for your continued support of socio-bioeconomy endeavors in the region. And thank you, hosts, for a wonderful opportunity. We wish you all a very good day. Goodbye.